The Horus Heresy taught the Imperium a comforting lie, that the greatest threat the Emperor ever faced was betrayal, that Horus Lupercal, war master of the Imperium, was the most dangerous of his sons, that chaos was the ultimate enemy, and that all disasters could be traced back to corruption, pride, or weakness. This lie persists because it is survivable. The truth is far worse. Before Horus ever turned, before the warp burned half the galaxy, before brother raised blade against brother, the Emperor erased one of his sons so completely that even memory itself was deemed too dangerous to preserve. Not because this Primarch rebelled, not because he fell to chaos, but because he understood something the Emperor could not allow to exist. This is the story of the Primarch the Emperor feared more than Horus. To understand why Horus was tolerated and this one was not, we must first discard the simplistic hierarchy of threats that imperial history encourages. Horus was catastrophic, yes, but he was also predictable. The Emperor knew ambition. He knew pride. He knew that the warp whispers louder to those who believe themselves indispensable. Horus was a weapon turned against its maker, but he remained a weapon nonetheless. A thing that could be fought, opposed, mythologized, and eventually contained within a narrative of righteous tragedy. The Lost Primarch did not offer that luxury. He did not oppose the Emperor with armies or ideology or demonic patronage. He opposed him with comprehension. The surviving fragments of canon tell us almost nothing directly about the 2nd and 11 Primarchs, and that silence is itself the loudest testimony. We know that they were removed early in the Great Crusade. We know their legions were disbanded or absorbed. We know Malcador personally enforced the erasure of their memory. We know that speaking of them was forbidden, even among Primarchs. We know that Rogal Dorn briefly remembered and agreed with the necessity of forgetting. That final point should trouble any serious student of imperial history. Dorn does not accept convenience. He does not bow to fear. He does not compromise principle lightly. If Dorn consented to the annihilation of a brother's memory, then the danger posed was not emotional, political, or military. It was existential. Let us examine what kind of threat requires such a response. Chaos was not unknown to the Emperor. He had bargained with the warp at Molech. He understood its nature well enough to weaponize it, and dangerous enough to plan its containment. The Primarchs themselves were not ignorant of chaos, even if they lacked full context. The Emperor tolerated partial knowledge because ignorance could be managed. Horus fell because he was shown a lie wrapped around a truth. The Lost Primarch did not fall because he was shown a truth stripped of lies. This Primarch saw the Imperium not as it was, but as it would inevitably become. An empire of stagnation, enforced ignorance, ritualized decay, and psychic consumption, masquerading as salvation. He saw that the Emperor's vision for humanity was not eternal enlightenment, but controlled evolution under absolute authority. He saw that the imperial truth was not truth at all, but a psychological anesthetic meant to delay humanity's psychic awakening until it could be harnessed safely. And most dangerously of all, he understood that the Emperor was not preventing godhood. He was engineering it. The Emperor presents himself as the enemy of gods, the destroyer of superstition, the rational master of mankind. But the mechanisms he builds tell another story. A galaxy united under singular belief. A psychic species guided into worshipful dependence. A throne that feeds on souls. A presence in the warp that grows stronger with every act of devotion and sacrifice. the Lost Primarch saw the contradiction. Where others obeyed, doubted, or resented, this one concluded. Horus believed he was saving humanity from a tyrant. This Primarch understood that humanity was being reshaped into fuel. Such a realization cannot be fought with legions. It spreads. It convinces. It does not require chaos, only honesty. The Emperor could tolerate a traitor who raged against him. He could not tolerate a son who calmly explained why the Imperium must not exist. Evidence of this fear lies not in what is said, but in what is done. There are traitor Primarchs whose names are cursed yet preserved. There are demonic monstrosities whose histories are taught as warnings. There are fallen legions whose heraldry still stains the galaxy. But there are no myths of the lost, no cautionary tales, no corrupted relics, nothing. This is not how the Imperium handles failure. It is how it handles truth. At this point in the archive, consider this question, not as a viewer, but as a scholar. If a Primarch, crafted by the Emperor himself, armed with unmatched intellect and perspective, concluded that the Imperium was fundamentally wrong, would you dismiss him as a traitor, or would you listen? Pause here. Leave a comment, not declaring loyalty or heresy, but answering this. If you had learned what he learned, would you still kneel? Then continue. The Lost Primarch's erasure also explains something often overlooked: why the Emperor allowed Horus to rise so high. Horus was charismatic, yes, but he was also controllable. His worldview remained within the Emperor's framework. Even in rebellion, Horus sought rulership, not abolition. He wanted to replace the Emperor, not dismantle the Imperium. That made him survivable as a concept. The Lost Primarch threatened the entire premise of imperial authority. He did not need to win battles. He only needed to be right. This is why the response was surgical rather than spectacular. No grand purge, no civil war, no recorded execution, just removal. Memory excised, history rewritten. Legions redistributed quietly to avoid uncomfortable questions. Even the Primarchs were not trusted with the truth. Malcador did not erase their memories to protect them. He erased them to protect reality itself. Because once the question is asked, it cannot be unanswered. If the Imperium is doomed by design, then loyalty becomes complicity. And if the Emperor knows this, then his morality collapses. This Primarch's existence risked triggering a philosophical heresy long before the military one. The Emperor could rebuild armies. He could not rebuild belief. This also reframes the Emperor's later actions. His refusal to explain, his withdrawal from humanity, his obsession with control over trust. These are not the behaviors of a ruler blindsided by betrayal. They are the behaviors of one who has already faced an argument he could not refute. In this light, the Horus heresy becomes less a tragedy and more a containment failure. The Emperor underestimated chaos, yes, but he underestimated something else far more dangerous: understanding. The Lost Primarch represents the road not taken by the narrative. A version of resistance that does not scream or burn or mutate. One that simply refuses the premise. That is why he had to vanish completely. No shrine, no corpse, no demon prince, not even a name. Because names invite questions, and questions invite conclusions. The Imperium survives not because it is right, but because alternatives have been erased. And somewhere beneath Terra, or beyond the webway, or dissolved into history itself, lies the shadow of a Primarch who proved that the greatest threat to the Emperor was never chaos. It was clarity. And that is why Horus is remembered as the greatest traitor. But the one the Emperor truly feared is remembered as nothing at all.